To start, I mean, here we're sitting here at the end of February 2019, and there are a few months still left of this semester, but I'm just curious what this experience is like for you to be in this semester and knowing that you are about to retire. You have obviously a enormous institutional footprint here and a deep history on this campus. What does it feel like?
Well, I can tell you, this has been kind of a bittersweet reality almost.
Yeah.
I love Springfield College. I love the mission, I love the philosophy, the history. Oh my gosh, it's so rich. And for someone who's in physical education and sport, this couldn't be a better place to be.
Yeah.
And I'm going to miss teaching, which I love most of all.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the bitter part. Sweet is all my wonderful memories of. And I've had the best colleagues. And this is no suck up to you, but really, like you, I've been so fortunate throughout the years to have people that I've been able to really respect.
Mm-hmm.
Had some others too.
Yeah, sure. Comes with the territory.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's a significant time in my life, obviously.
Sure. Yeah, and I mean, does it hit you sometimes when you're just walking around the campus?
It does. The other day I drove into the campus and it was like, wow, I think I better stop by here every now and then and just drive through again. It just really struck me at that moment.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine as you begin to sort of experience the first of the lasts, and you probably have had some of the lasts this year, that just really generates some nostalgia. And so.
We have one of our ex-students who keeps bugging me. Kathy Mangano is one of the greatest colleagues I could ever have, but she's bugging Kathy and me. She thinks that we should have a last lecture. And I think it'll be goodbye.
Yeah.
Nothing much more than that. But it's very nice. She's quite an accomplished exercise physiologist.
Yep, no question.
Somewhere out in the world actually she's at Penn State, and that's Mary Jane D'Souza.
Oh.
And of course Kathy's our
Yep.
one and only.
Sure. So, all right, so let's now just considerably rewind the tape. I was looking over some notes from a previous interview that we did in a different context about Dr. O some years ago.
Oh, yes.
And I saw at that time that I got from you some biographical information about growing up in Summit, New Jersey.
Yes.
And so maybe talk a little bit about who you were before you came here. What was, if someone were to have a window into your upbringing and your teenage years, what sort of person would they see?
Well, I think the first thing probably that would help inform what kind of a person even I am today is that when I was born, my father was a lieutenant in the fire department, and we lived above the firehouse. So we had a fire pole in our apartment. It was like a closet door, which I thought was the most fun in the whole world, except of course I wasn't supposed to be going down the fire pole. And the door of the downstairs where the fire pole exited into the firehouse was a walk that the chief always made, and I always hit him when I opened the door, and my father would be so mad at me. So, and it was also a perfect escape route if I was in trouble for something I shouldn't have done. Could get out of town fast. And so I went to the Summit public schools and I really did have a wonderful education. I'm very blessed and feel very good about that.
Did you have siblings growing up?
I did. I had an older brother who was a fighter pilot in the Navy, and an older sister who was just probably very influential in my life.
In what sort of ways?
Just her goodness, her kindness, her goodness, caring, neat.
And your relationship with your folks?
Oh, great. My mother was fabulous. She was an RN at a time when people weren't, but well, first of all, she was a wing walker. And during fairs, she would get, that was before I was born. Although my siblings think I was conceived on the wing of a plane. They think that's I don't know. You never know about my mother. But anyway, Yeah, so she was a wing walker, and she also, when she was nursing, we were growing up. Well, it was before that actually that she played the piano for the silent movies,
Uh-huh.
which helped her pay her way through nursing school. So she
Uh-huh.
was very independent, pretty smart woman,
Uh-huh.
and yeah, she was very special.
Yeah. And what were your parents' first names?
Gerda, Gerda. My
Uh-huh.
mother
Yeah.
was born just when her folks arrived from Denmark.
Uh-huh.
Gerda Sorensen.
Yeah.
So there's that part of my background,
Yeah.
which I'm very proud of.
Yeah.
And my father, Gordon, he was a character too.
Mm.
And as I said, he played professional baseball for, I think it was the Susquehanna team. It was a AAA team of the Yankees.
Uh-huh.
And Pennsylvania, I think it was Susquehanna. He played for a couple of years, and that's how he started to become a firefighter, because they were so happy to have a semi-professional athlete on their squad, staff, whatever that is called, group, that they let him go in the summers, and then he'd come back and do his firefighting the rest of the year when he wasn't playing baseball. So.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, you grew up in a time before at least some of the waves of feminism that would really change the country.
Yes.
And what was your sense of the life that was ahead of you as you
Well, I really loved sport,
uh-huh.
and so
from the beginning?
yeah, and I wanted to be. So I wanted to do something in sport. It was
Yeah.
that or pre-med.
Uh-huh.
I guess I
Yeah.
picked the right one for me.
Yeah.
But my high school that I went to was ahead of many
And
other
you played
places.
three sports in high school, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Field hockey, basketball, and
Yeah.
softball.
Uh-huh.
But they were way ahead. We had competitive against all of the local or sort of close towns. And every season we'd play probably 10 games.
Mm-hmm.
And then, this is the interesting thing, I came to Springfield, I think interesting,
Yeah.
because my high school physical education teacher was a friend of Ruth Evans, who was the first director
Mm-hmm.
of women's physical education here, and she had a very deep voice, "Mary, you have to go to Springfield College." Oh, really? I don't know anything about it. And it was the only school I applied to, and I came here, but I went to meet the director, Ruth Evans, Dr. Evans. She put a note out for me to come see her. When I walked into her office, she said, "Do you have any questions?" Dear Mimi, she was very
Yeah.
lovely. She was a socialite in Springfield. "Dear Mimi, do you have any questions for me?" And of course I said, "Yeah, when does hockey practice start?" And she said, "Oh, my dear." Stared right at me, and I was like, she said, "We don't do that here." Oh my gosh, I went out, I was so crestfallen. I went out of her office, I went home and I called my mother. "I can't stay here, they don't have hockey." So I think you could stay there for a couple of weeks. And so then, people said, "Well, let's get together and have our own hockey team." So we did, and we played a little bit of club hockey. But by the time I was a junior, we were playing other schools regularly on an intercollegiate basis. But that was terrible.
Yeah, and I think you had told me in the earlier interview that you came close to. I mean, it was that phone call that you thought this is just not a place that you could really stay at.
If I couldn't play sport.
Uh huh. Yep.
So yeah, I was not feeling real comfortable.
Right, and I guess a lot of the high schools were sort of ahead of the colleges then in terms of
They were,
sports for
and that's what
females.
I automatically assumed. Well, they'll have to have.
Sure.
But I had been contacted by McMurray College about coming there, and they went and talked to my mother about some kind of help, financially, and but I decided to come here, and they had teams. It was to play hockey.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Interesting, and it had been. I think it was 51 was the year that we went co-ed. Here at Springfield College. It was only like 6 years prior.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And how, other than the lack of intercollegiate sports, what was the culture of the campus that you arrived at? It's for people who are, see the campus just, through the lens of the 2000 teens.
Oh, I
What
know.
did the campus look like? What did it feel like?
Well,
Where did you live? What was
it
the
was
whole?
pretty shabby, actually.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And the facilities that I had in high school were much better than the
Uh-huh.
facilities here. And there was certainly a macho sense on the
Yeah.
campus. And we had to wear skirts
Yeah.
to every class.
Mm-hmm.
But often, we'd wear something under them and a trench coat, pull our slacks up.
Yeah.
I remember in Karpovich's class,
Yeah.
Peter Karpovich's class, and he had done something, the lights were off, and he said, peasant, you, turn on the lights. So, I got up, I ran over, my pajama bottoms fell down.
Yeah.
They unrolled. Go back to bed. When you have time, get dressed, come back to class. So, it was Peter.
Uh-huh.
So that was just so very different.
Yeah. Yeah, that is it's a great anecdote. Where on campus did you live when you?
I lived in Abbey.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I lived on the third floor of Abbey most of the 4 years. Excuse me.
And it was a very,
It was just
segregated
female.
culture
It was
in terms of
women's
gender.
gym. Yeah,
Yeah.
women's dorm. Yes.
Uh-huh. And who were some of the people who were most influential during your time here as a student in those?
Well, actually, Dr. Evans was. Ruth
Uh-huh.
Evans was very influential. Margaret Thorson, she was a brilliant statistician. She was very much down to earth. She was brilliant, but she was also had no common sense.
Mhm.
And so we were always trying to get her out of jams, for some
Mhm.
things that she would do. But she was very much so helpful for me. And Betty Wiesner was a skills teacher. And Betty Wiesner she was so enthusiastic.
Yeah.
She'd get up and everything was, all right, now, today we're going to play hockey. Is everybody ready? And you had to say, yeah, we're ready and all that kind of stuff. But she just really was into it. She was a fabulous skills teacher. And Diane Babbitt,
Uh-huh.
who was also quite different,
Yeah.
very sophisticated, very low key, but excellent teachers.
Mhm.
So I would say they were.
Right. And obviously some students too. I know that you had mentioned to me in another context that you were a couple of years behind Tom Waddell, but that you knew him during his
Absolutely.
time. And can you just give us a little bird's eye view into him at that point?
Absolutely. Oh, everybody had a crush on Tom.
Uh-huh.
He was just,
Yeah.
he was like the perfect man in all regards, because he was so polite and proper and always appropriate. He was, great gymnast, great football player.
Yeah.
I remember seeing him catch a pass. I'd never seen anyone make that great a catch at
Mhm.
UConn. It was the only time I think Springfield beat UConn.
Uh-huh.
Just a really fabulous person. I think I went to a couple of dances with him.
Uh-huh.
He had, as you know, of course, Marty, his mother was a dance teacher.
Yep.
And his father got interested in it as well. So they had a dance studio. So Tom really grew up dancing,
Mm-hmm.
as well as all of his sports. So he was fabulous.
Uh-huh. And what are there specific moments, memories from your time, for college years that really jump out as like days that were particularly memorable, or anecdotes that when you think back on your own college days that can be shared with an audience?
That can be told.
Right.
Okay. I think I told you the one. I think this
Yeah.
is maybe this is inappropriate,
Yeah.
but the Olds were in power.
Yeah.
And they invited me to, with the other student,
Yeah.
quote, leaders. I was a student leader because I was the fire chief of Abbey.
Uh-huh.
Isn't that a remarkable thing?
The
I had a little
apple,
medal.
apple didn't fall very far there.
No,
huh?
but they gave me
Yeah.
this little child's toy,
Yeah.
fire truck. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Anyway, we got invited to the Olds,
Yeah.
and Mrs. Olds was there as well, and this is when we were getting first to know
Yeah.
them. And she finally, after Glenn spoke, who was probably one of the most articulate speakers I've ever heard,
Mm-hmm.
she spoke and wanted to ask a few questions of us. And so she went around, and I don't know why she asked she said, I want to know from the women, or the girls, I think she said, I would like to know, do you go to the men's housing off campus? And some of us raised our hands. I raised my hand, yeah, and she said, oh, you're a harlot.
Wow.
And I thought it was a compliment. So I went home and looked it up in my dictionary. Oh, thank you, Mrs. Oles. That's so nice of you. Oh, brother. So I often think of her.
Yeah.
I think of some of the wonderful men I had as teachers too, whom I haven't mentioned. But Archie Allen was fabulous. Often he'd be assigned to a women's class, and he was a wonderful teacher, a fun guy.
Yeah. When you left here in 1961, did you think that it was likely that you would be coming back at some point?
No.
Or did you think that was goodbye?
Yeah, I thought it was goodbye. On to the next.
Yeah.
That whole thing. But
and the next was you
I
got
taught
a
a high
teaching and
school.
coaching job at a high school.
Yeah, at a rich high school in New Jersey as well, and coached everything.
Yeah.
And really loved it, and kind of started to think about, well, we had a lot of success in gymnastics, which I never did.
Right.
Myself, I did a lot of dance. I should mention back, I do have to go back, Jeannie Dozier, who was a professor of dance, was really influential. She really brought me along, and it was wonderful in the dance.
Yeah.
But anyhow, I taught there, and I thought, probably I should get a master's for a lot of reasons, but maybe I can help the gymnastics program at Springfield, or be a part of it. And so I sent in my application and said I would really like to be an assistant coach, and I got to be an assistant to Jeannie teaching dance, but the first year, and then I was an assistant coach in gymnastics. But they were very interested because Diane Potter had filled in. They didn't have anybody who had had a whole lot of knowledge, and I've had probably as much as anybody at that time. It was pre-Olga Corbett.
Right.
So.
And you had never competed in this sport yourself.
Oh my God.
But.
It'd be dangerous.
Right.
No, I'm kidding.
But I know that obviously there's you would create an interesting precedent that Charlie Sullivan would follow about winning national championship in a sport that you yourself had not participated in.
Yes.
But that's no small task to
Well, I think
learn
that
it
we were
so deeply that.
Yeah, we were at the beginning though, Marty, and certainly learned it as we went along. That's for sure.
Yeah. And how did you go about that? I mean, in terms of gaining that expertise.
I learned so much from the athletes I coached, to be very honest. And we ended up being those individuals who actually went out and taught a lot of gymnastics. We were always at somebody's gym teaching, and it was a way for us to raise a little money to go to nationals, but we probably I would say we learned together. And gymnastics really is a matter of mechanics in most cases, and having a good understanding of how the body moves, I think. I think you can analyze it and watching it by the angles, speeds, things like that.
So some of the things that you learned here were
absolutely.
able to really.
Mechanical analysis was the name of the class that really set me going.
And that you were able to sort of put that into play when it came into into your coaching. And then so as you're sort of making this pitch to come back here, so that what year was that? That was 67, 68?
Yeah. So, yes, it was.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, yes. And Ann Jewett was the director of women's physical education, quite a prominent academician at the time in physical education. And I had an interview with her, and I was so impressed because she was also, I think, one of the few females who had high rank in the Navy, and she happened to be in her captain's uniform. Oh my goodness. Well, I felt like saluting. I was so impressed that here was this woman who was going to be teaching here. She had been in the reserve and had been at a meeting. Was in a Navy uniform. But anyhow, actually that was undergraduate. I'm sorry. She was here. No, she was here when I came back for graduate work. And so I just made a home for myself in East Gym,
Mm-hmm.
where we used to do gymnastics.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'll probably die of white lung.
Uh-huh.
You know how miners die of black lung?
Yeah.
I don't think there was a gymnast I ever coached who didn't chalk their hands up
Yeah.
and then come and talk to me and go,
Uh-huh.
okay, coach, you know,
Yeah.
So I think the hazards of coaching gymnastics, white lung.
Uh-huh. And what did, as you returned to the campus, I mean, it had been 6 years, 7 years out, something along 5 years. And things had, there were some things that had shifted. I mean, there was
Yes,
now
things had
intercollegiate
changed.
sports.
Yes, strong
Uh,
intercollegiate sports.
Mm-hmm.
Very strong.
And then also coming into an era in the late 60s that was a very different sort of political climate
Yes.
on campus. And so what
Yes.
was that experience of coming back
It was a very, the whole, which is, still part of our country, of course, but the whole racial issues were going on here, and I was coaching the afternoon that the black students took over the floor in alumni, in the
administration?
ad building.
Yeah.
And so, that was really going on at the time. There were some very heated discussions, faculty heated discussions. It was really quite stimulating, actually. Things we don't talk about anymore.
Yeah.
Wish we did, but
Yeah.
more. So that was the social,
Yeah.
cultural, and women's issues were starting to
Yeah.
come forth. And near the end of my coaching, we had been so successful that I only coached for 6 years, but we had been so successful that I got invited to talk at these different places. And one invitation was to Congress, to the Senate, to a hearing committee on Title IX. And it was my last year of coaching, I think. And so I said, well, I couldn't go till the season was over, but I'd be glad to go and talk about the importance of women's athletics for females.
Mm-hmm.
So I got there, and before me, speaking was Darryl Arroyo.
Uh-huh.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Darryl Arroyo was our wrestling coach,
Right.
but Darryl Royal was the
Football coach at Texas.
and
or,
yes, at Texas, and the director of athletics. And he was speaking about why we shouldn't pass this legislation, that Congress shouldn't go for it. And at the end of his presentation, he said, and I can promise you, and there were two women, besides those of us that were there testifying for, I think there were two senators that were female then. He said, I can tell you all that if you pass this legislation, it will be the end of American football. And this audible sigh came up out there, all the men, oh gosh. So then I got up and probably was, oh, you should really consider women's athletics. I just wish I knew then what I know now about the kinds of things I should have said. I told him it was valuable, but I'm sure I wasn't very forceful. But anyway, Title IX got passed. That was not really Title IX, that was Civil Rights Restoration Act, which is was a renewal of Title IX.
Interesting. And then so I mean, your coaching career, as you say, I mean, was relatively brief, but
6 years.
startlingly successful. I mean,
Yes.
they're just,
Yeah.
you could go into the annals of NCAA coaches. I mean, I know there's
Yeah.
little, if any,
Yeah, there's.
precedent for.
I don't either.
Yeah.
We won. We were undefeated
Yeah.
in dual meets. We won all the Eastern Regional Championships, and of course won 3 national championships. Division 1, 2, and 3 combined.
And what was the reaction on? I mean, I know you just had this celebration of the '69, the 50th anniversary, but at the time, was this something that was well celebrated on the campus? Was it acknowledged much? Was it not even?
It was mentioned,
Yeah.
but it wasn't certainly celebrated.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until this time, and I know Kathy Mangano's been pushing for it, that anybody even realized that we hosted the first women's every sport national championship here,
Mm-hmm.
and then we won it. We won it by a tenth of a point.
Mm-hmm.
Because the team that was in first, the coach spotted one of his gymnasts, which is...
Oh, is that right? Wow.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we won by a tenth of a point.
Uh-huh.
And they had like 2 Olympians on their team, and we were just all freshmen,
Uh-huh.
except for our one captain who was a senior, and they just worked hard,
Mm-hmm.
and they believed in themselves.
Yeah. And the national championships that were hosted here, how many teams participated in that?
I could look it up. There were probably about 30. It was
Uh-huh.
very large because it was an open. They
Across all
qualified
divisions.
by score.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to, whether they were Division 1, 2, or 3, had to have a certain average score for that season.
Mm-hmm.
So there were quite a few.
Yeah. Had there been any other Springfield College athletic teams that had ever won something that was a national championship prior to?
No, not
No.
prior to.
Yeah.
And Charlie's won, of course. Charlie has
Sure.
won 3 of the Division 3 championships, which is fabulous.
Right.
Really fabulous.
Right. So yeah, considerable achievement, obviously. I mean, you've been here a long time. 6 years is just a small fraction of the time that
Yes.
you have been here. But how do you regard that achievement as you sort of think back on what you've accomplished? How much a part of what you've accomplished here is that?
I think that it's been wonderful
Yeah.
because I've carried it wherever I've gone in all of the different endeavors I've done, and it
Mm-hmm.
always has kind of made me a credible reference to talk about women's
Mhm.
sport. So
Yeah.
in everything else I've done the rest of my life, that's been, I think, probably one of the real advantages I've had.
Mhm.
Oh, coach the national championship
Yeah.
team. Oh, well, you must know about coaching.
Yeah.
Well,
Maybe a thing or two.
well, maybe
Yeah.
not.
And what were the circumstances? Why did you leave it after the 6 years?
Oh, I decided that so much of every sport is the mind.
Yeah.
You know, and the ancient Chinese told us 4,000 years ago, the
Yeah.
mind rules the body.
Yeah.
And it took those of us in the United States a long time
Yeah.
to realize this. And after coaching this wonderful teams, I realized how much the mind and how little I really knew. I knew exercise physiology, I knew biomechanics, but how much did I really know about how the mind does
Mhm.
control the body? So UConn had started a sports psychology program, and so I thought, well, maybe I'll go there and see if I can get a doctorate in that area. Certainly, very few people had them in sports psychology, and so I applied there and got in with because of the man who was the director, Tom Sheehan of the sports psych program, who wanted to have a coach in the program.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I left. I took a sabbatical and then a leave of absence and finished my doctorate.
Mm-hmm.
Came back here and asked that I not coach.
Yeah.
Here's a Springfield College story. So when I get back here, my first year back, I'm all excited about teaching and teaching sports psychology. And Dr. Stites called me in, and Ed Stites called me and said, Mimi, we need your help. I said, yes. And he said, well, we don't have a coach for women's track and field. I said, track and field? He said, yes, so I'm hoping, I know that's where your heart beats, women's athletics. So I'm hoping you'd consider coaching that. I thought, I don't know. Vern Cox, who was our men's coach, I left his office. He said, well, I'm just going to assign you to it because we really need it. So, typical of that era. So I went running over to Vern. Vern, you've got to help me. Don't worry about it. I'll help you with everything.
Yeah.
That's Vern would do. And so a week after that, he called me in again. He said, don't worry about the track and field, but you're coaching volleyball. So I coached the women's volleyball team, I think, for 2 years, which was a wonder. I'm really glad.
Yeah.
I didn't like the idea at first, I can tell you,
Yeah.
because that's a fall sport.
Mm-hmm.
And here it was August. I did learn a lesson, though. As a faculty member, when they call you in the summer, don't go in. Be away.
That is a good lesson. That is. I would agree with that. And so, I mean, this was a real sort of fork in the road for you when the sort of the
Yeah.
decision to really devote yourself to this
Yes.
this sort of, you know, emerging field
Yeah.
of sports psychology.
Yes.
And did you sense right away as you began to explore it that this was really going to be a very deep path for you?
I did.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And it was a way of staying in athletics and still being able to use some of the expertise I had. And so it was a wonderful opening for me,
Mm-hmm.
which I think when I applied it, I don't know that I realized it was going to be as much of a help as it was.
Right. And I mean, clearly that is a field that has seen just explosive growth in
Yes.
in recent years. And
Yes.
you know, you'd be hard pressed to find high level teams at the professional or even collegiate level that
Yeah.
are not employing
Exactly.
the services of sports psychology, sports psychologists, and so it seems that the world has sort of caught up a bit.
Yeah, once again,
Yeah.
it was kind of on the, and also I was sort of on the one of the leading edges. I know we have a national organization, and I think I was the second woman who became certified
Mm-hmm.
as a consultant. So I was once again kind of on the edge, which was good.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that's kept your interest for a long time. Sports
Yes, it
psych.
has.
Yep.
Yes.
Well, how have you seen that field sort of change and grow over the years?
Gratefully, it's become more academic.
Mm-hmm.
There used to be people who, you know, their credential for doing sports psychology was, I was on a junior high school basketball team and I really learned a lot, you know,
Mhm.
kind of thing, and that was their credential. It's become more demanding, and I'm very proud of our program. I was lucky enough to be able to start that,
Mm-hmm.
and we've really gone along and had so many graduates who've entered the field of sports psychology.
Mm-hmm.
But we're more academic, and we're more concerned about our backgrounds, our professionalism. That would be a
Mhm.
good word to cover. Than the early many of the people in sports psychology were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it seems, I mean, even young athletes coming up, I mean, are just, you know, I guess it's in the DNA of any competitive person that you're looking for that whatever edge that you can, and that
Yes.
you know, the competitive climate is a very hard one to succeed in, and it's kind of different from the classroom in some ways, and that, you know, theoretically speaking, every student in my class can do well. One person's success does not imply another person not doing well, but
Exactly.
often in a athletic arena, you know,
Yeah.
one team's victory means another team's defeat, and so
Yeah.
there's that tension,
Yeah.
and you know what you can do within ethical bounds to create a
Yes.
competitive edge is
That's the
is to
right
your
word,
benefit.
ethical bounds.
Right.
Yes.
right. You know, we've certainly, you know, seen some of the pressures in sports that have had people sort of leapfrogging that what
Oh,
that
yeah.
might be.
I've had people call me and say, "I'd really like you to brainwash for my team."
Uh huh. Yeah.
I said, "Go ahead, go to Korea."
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not my
Yeah.
avenue or event, so
Yeah.
no, I can't
Yeah.
work with your team.
Yeah. As a result of you know, some of the success that you've had here in various arenas, coaching, sports psych, you have become at various times a really very public spokesperson for a number of things that you believe in some really high profile ways, and that's been an interesting incarnation of your life, it seems like.
Yes.
That, I mean, so there's the whole like media part
Yes.
of it, and maybe talk a little bit about that. I mean, I know that you were, you know, for years you were like you were right there
Commentator
with Jim McKay,
Gymnastics,
right?
yes. Yeah, I did do 2 programs with Jim McKay.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think once again because of our success in
Yeah.
gymnastics, and I was finishing my doctorate, so I did have time, and a woman, Eleanor Rieger, she was the first female producer for ABC, Wide World of Sport.
Uh-huh.
And she had heard from me via Billie Jean King. I'd done a program that Billie Jean was on.
Yeah.
And Billie Jean told Ellie Rieger to call me, and she called me and she said, would you be interested in doing some color commentating, which is what they used to call it, expert commentating in sports gymnastics. And I said, yeah, I'd love to try it.
Yeah.
So I did. And then I did ABC Wide World of Sports,
Yeah.
and then NBC Sports World.
Yeah.
But that was very short-lived. That was about 3 years, I think I did that.
But enjoyable.
Oh, it
part
was
of
very enjoyable. I got to
Yeah.
meet so many different people. And one other thing that I didn't mention, which I think was a plus that got me into these other activities, is that while I was, the year I began my doctorate at UConn, I coached the United States team to the World Games in Russia, in Moscow. We were the first athletes to be allowed, other than Russian athletes, in the Soviet, I should say, Soviet Union. And having that credential also was very helpful.
That must have been a very interesting experience.
It was very,
What year was that?
oh golly, Marty, 1976, I believe.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and it was the whole social, cultural thing was fascinating.
Yeah,
And
very
the
well.
differences. I remember we landed, when we came back, when we landed at Kennedy, the whole track and field team, and we filled a big plane, ran out and kissed the ground. American athletes.
Wow.
They're just too cool to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Want to bet? After 2 weeks in the Soviet Union, they were very happy to be home.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And then some of the plaudits and accolades from some really prominent groups, National Organization for Women, Women's Sport Foundation.
Yes.
So maybe talk a little bit, if you could, about some of those.
Well, I was delighted to serve as president of the National Association for Girls and Women in Sport, because we were going through trying to lobby for the kind of the rebirth of the Civil Rights Restoration Act. Ted Kennedy was very supportive in that. Boy, what a wonderful legislator he was. He knew when votes were going to come on the floor. He knew how they were going to go. It was phenomenal. And so often I would testify in that regard for that. And his aide would say, well, Ted will call you on the day you have to be here. Just get down here. And that day, we're going to bring it up, and sure enough, it came up. But so that was a wonderful experience. And working at Title IX, Civil Rights Restoration Act, was just involved all of the kind of quote minority groups. So it was the age was involved, and handicapped, disabled, and women, and Black Power was very going on at that time too. And so they would call us in. Actually, the NCAA set us up to have some of the senators call us in, and they would say, look, drop those other guys. Leave the seniors alone. Leave the disabled alone. We'll pass Title IX that'll only have women's sports in it. And then they would do the same thing to the disabled group. Fortunately, we were all talking with each other and said, no way. And had we not, we'd have nothing. Well, we might have something, but not the years of Title IX that we did have and the rebirth of it. It was an interesting time.
And then maybe lastly, at least for now, if you could just sort of walk me through some of the highlights of this office, and some of, because I'm sure that there are many memories that are, but some of the highlights of some of the pictures, what things that are represented, since this is kind of your little institutional home here. I like to be able to describe it well.
My little archives.
Your archive.
The Murray archives.
So
Well, let's start over here. These are Vern Cox,
Okay.
and he was such a magnificent teacher. In all regards. So he's a significant role model for me. Betty Mann, who was the director of the graduate programs, she helped get our sports psychology program accredited, and just a wonderful colleague and friend. And this photograph is just how the one below it is just
Yeah.
how pervasive sport is.
Yeah.
This is at a prep school, and they're playing a football game, and the dorm behind them is on fire,
Yeah.
and everybody's watching the game.
Yep.
I mean, God, who has time for a fire?
Right.
Everything I own is burning up.
Right.
So that's
That is a wild photo.
I know. And I
Yeah.
probably should mention this man,
Yeah.
Amos Alonzo Stagg,
Yeah.
who's our first football coach.
Yeah.
Quick little story, I promise
Yeah.
I'll be quick.
No, that's
This
fine.
woman was
It's
going
great.
down the hall the other day, and she
Yeah.
said to me, "Oh, Mimi, I love that portrait of you up there." I said, "Portrait of me?" And I turned around, she said, I said, "Oh, no, that's not me, that's Amos Alonzo Stagg, the famous football coach."
Yeah.
So anyway,
Well, some of the same lustrous.
yeah,
hair, so-
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Marty. And this is Tara Sherman, myself, and PK, this photograph, and it's 3 generations of teachers.
Uh-huh.
Atara taught here, and wonderful teacher, and then she was in charge of physical education at a wonderful college in Israel. She was Israeli and had been in the army, so she had wonderful stories.
Mhm.
And then PK Chung was my student, who's now the head of the department at Hong Kong, physical education department in Hong Kong Baptist. They're sports psych students. That wall is the gymnastics.
That's one of your gymnastics.
Yeah, they just gave that to me.
Oh, that's great.
Tammy did that photo. Some wonderful All-Americans on
Yeah.
that team. They were great. So those are the gymnasts.
Yeah.
Many of them All-Americans.
Yeah.
They were funny on our reunion. They were talking about, it's what I find with teams that come back here, they always have things to tell you that are funny.
Yeah.
They don't, the record doesn't mean that much to
that-
them. Yeah.
That doesn't stay as much.
No.
Yeah.
But Bonnie, who was the captain of the team, sitting in the middle of that photo, she, our first meet, she was the only senior on the team. They were all freshmen. I was a freshman. And we left for the first meet of that year, and we got down to the Mass Turnpike, and somebody said, "Where's Bonnie?" I said, "Gosh, I don't know. Where is she?" I'd forgotten Bonnie, the captain, right?
Uh-huh.
So we turned around the bus, came back, there in the middle of Walton Street, on her hands and knees like this, "Please take me to the meet," and the traffic is going by her. I mean, so we had wonderful stories. Yeah,
That's great.
about a bomb
Yeah.
scare. After we won the first national championship, the next, we were going to Des Moines, Illinois for the next championship, and there was a bomb scare on the plane. Somebody had
Yeah.
called in a bomb scare. So we landed in Moline, Illinois. It was like a Piper Cub
Yeah.
airport, and it's kind of cool. And only in that, one of the women on the team, Patty Corrigan, fell in love with an FBI agent, and the only way you could go to the bathroom was with an FBI agent with you. So she was in the bathroom when she was in the lobby, I can tell you right now. But it was sort of, I went back into the plane. I broke through the
Yeah.
people and got the floor exercise music.
Yeah.
How can you go to a national meet and
Yeah.
the plane blows up and you don't have floor music?
Yeah.
So I think we were flying United, and they put
Yeah.
us on first class. It was a first class flight I think anybody had that in our
Uh-huh.
group, and presented us with flowers. So it was kind of great. And I think they had headlines where small school from Massachusetts wins national championship, big question mark.
Uh-huh.
So we're sure that Southern Illinois, the coach of Southern Illinois, called it in.
Interesting.
And these are just some international people.
Yeah.
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
He was president of the President's Fitness Council
Yeah.
when I was president of the American Alliance for Physical Education and Recreation. And dance, and we went to many states to meet with governors to have them have more physical
Yeah.
education required.
That's a
Yeah, he
Good
was a
company.
very
He-
nice guy.
Yeah.
Very. That lower picture is of the senators, and Pat Schroeder, Congresswoman, is in there. Barbara Boxer was on TV every now and then, is the littlest one, but who were very instrumental in passing Title IX.
uh-huh.
And I think Pat signed it. It says "Keep Marching." The photo above that,
where was that photo taken? What was it?
that was in Washington.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and the one above it was at the first. I was president of National Association for Girls and Women in Sport when we had the first National Girls and Women in Sport Day
Mhm.
in Washington, and we were meeting with the Secretary of Education, Bennett. And in there are some of the greatest athletes of that time. Billie Jean is next to Bennett, and Willie White, who got an honorary doctorate here, great long jumper, she's in there. Carol Mann, the Greek golfer.
Mhm.
So we were all lobbying for more Title IX. And then this middle picture with the frame,
Yeah.
that's the International Olympic Committee, and that's Juan Samaranch, who was
Sure.
the president then. That was when I was president of the International Council for Sport and Physical Education.
Right.
And up here's Nancy Hogshead Makar, who
Uh-huh.
was four gold medals
Yeah.
in the Los Angeles Games, who's been here many times. That's about it.